All right. So hello everyone. This is another episode of Conversations with Rob. Please like, share these videos, and if you could, it'd be great to subscribe. No money involved in that. I've learned about this person that I've had on through watching a lot of my favorite shows, whether it's Jordan Sheridan, Jimmy Dore also, and Mike Figueredo. So I'm grateful for them to turning me on to this next candidate. It's Lauren Ashcraft. She is a stand-up comedian, a project manager, and also running for Congress in New York 12 against Carolyn Maloney. The primary date is June 23rd, 2020. So definitely if you're in New York City, I know we have fans from all over the country that are big Bernie supporters and big progressives. This is a progressive to definitely look out for. And like I said, I've watched multiple interviews with her on different platforms, and she really turns on the heat. And we need more people that are against the establishment to run, and the youth too. I mean, this woman, Carolyn Maloney, I know she's an establishment person because I used to be an establishment guy in college, rather, unfortunately. But then when you get out of college, and I'm sure you know this, Lauren, you kind of see what goes on in the world. You kind of know what student debt is. You know how hard it is to find a job. You know how much the rent is. So there's a lot of budgeting involved after college. But this woman, Carolyn Maloney's sat in that seat for so many years, and she's basically won because she's a Democrat. Nobody runs against her credibly in the primary, and there's low turnout. So let's all welcome Lauren Ashcraft to the show. And Lauren, I appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me on. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, so let's start off. What made you run for Congress instead of another position in government?
So I am a firm believer in the fact that there are no specific routes that you should follow. If you have a passion, if you want to be an everyday person that represents your community, it's
Right.
not that you have to, for example, first serve in city council or state legislature, but you can, I have ideas about federal policies that will make our country a better place and also my district. And I feel as though we could be doing so much more in such a strongly and safely blue district in the middle of this progressive wave of a movement. And we can choose right now between the status quo or somebody that leads conversations, works with other progressives and endorses them and helps them also become progressive leaders in the community, and also just be willing to fight and take risks and put yourself on the line rather than someone who signs on to the right things eventually because it's the popular thing to do.
Right, I agree. And your opponent's basically the status quo. She's, as we said, been in there for so many years, just follows that same Democratic line, doesn't stand up as you are for what she, what progressives rather believe in. So it's just sad. And like I said, we do need more blood like AOC, such as you. Other Cynthia Nixon ran. She didn't make it in New York, which was too bad because she was a good candidate. But we need more people to run against the establishment in New York, but all across the country. So
Absolutely.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Lauren. So learning more about you and watching all these interviews and stuff like that, you have really an amazing family story. If you could tell the viewers about it, because it really does show, a family that's really gone through tough times and really risen above it. So if you could just talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family is a huge inspiration for me and why I'm doing this. And I truly believe you need people in office who have faced the issues that you're facing and understand everyday issues in the community rather than someone who, is part of the 1% and doesn't go around knocking on doors and meeting people that are struggling to, use the subway, for example, because it's not accessible. So my family, on one side, my grandmother was an immigrant from Japan, and my grandfather was serving in the Air Force in the 50s in Japan. That's where they met because she was a typist on the Air Force base. They fell in love, had my dad in Japan, And then whenever my grandfather's tour was over, he took the family back to West Virginia. My grandmother and dad moved to the United States for the first time, and he needed to find a job that paid for food and housing, so he became a coal miner in West Virginia, where he was originally from.
Mhm.
And not that long after the family immigrated, he unfortunately, my grandfather was a victim of the 1968 Farmington mine disaster, which is corporate greed
Yeah.
and shortcuts, which ended up killing my grandfather and so many other people. So many families in Farmington and Mannington, West Virginia, in that area lost family members that day and were left with single moms, single parents
Right.
to figure out how to pay the bills. And my grandmother was one of them that survived off of my grandfather's very, very small Social Security checks
Yeah.
and tried her very best to use a small farming plot and a small farm to feed the family. She was a new immigrant, learning English,
Yeah.
didn't have an education. And whenever I hear about, income contribution caps, for example, that fund programs like Social Security that
Yeah.
kept my family alive, I hear about that burden being on the working people, and I believe, for example, that that income contribution cap of around $133,000 should be completely
Right.
removed. And you contribute to Social Security and programs like that that keep people alive for the entirety of your income, so that
Yeah.
that burden is no longer on working people that pay 100% pay on 100% of what they make to keep people alive. So whenever also I'm learning about how we're treating immigrants that are coming to this country and seeking a better life, it makes me really, really mad to see that, we look at certain people, probably because of the color of their skin, and say, hey, you're
Yeah.
welcome here. And then we put other people in cages and separate families at the border. And it's very reminiscent of when we had internment camps for
Right.
Japanese people, which could have affected my family.
Yeah.
And it's like we're not learning from our own history and from world history. And this is not the path that I want our country to be going down. We can do better, and we are all products of immigration. I definitely am,
Yeah.
but we all are, unless you are, you know, from an indigenous family.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm horribly mad at what's going on right now in terms of immigration, how the burden is on working people to fund programs that keep people alive. That's one side of my family that really put that in my blood, put that fight in me. And then on the other side of my family, my grandfather was a hardworking mechanic. He owned a small business where he repaired and sold trailers and vacation homes. And he was working one day and fell and, and broke his neck in such a way that he became a quadriplegic.
Mhm.
And I saw members of my family, my grandmother, my mother, other members of my family that all became the caretakers of my grandfather and basically spent all of their time that they could taking care of him.
Yeah.
And I think about programs like the federal jobs guarantee that I would love to have in this country that would
Right.
pay people who act as caretakers livable wages, because my mother, my grandmother, they did not they got paid negative amounts of money to help my grandfather survive. And that is the burden that we have in our society, that um, caretakers are not given livable wages, but it's such an important field, and caretakers keep people alive and give people a higher standard of living and dignity.
Right.
So I saw programs like that I would love to have enacted, and I really thank Bernie for raising awareness around this need that we have in our society. that everyone could have a livable wage for contributing to the betterment of everyone around them. That's a beautiful thing.
Right.
And then also through watching my grandfather navigate having a disability, a very severe one, I became infuriated at how an entire population of people goes completely ignored by their representatives. So, for example, if you're looking at New York City, especially District 12 that I live in and hope to represent, um, 75% of subway stations are not accessible to people that need wheelchairs and walkers, strollers, crutches. It's not just people with wheelchairs. Now, if you look at the fact that the Americans with Disabilities Act is 29 years old, that act has done a lot of good in our society, but it has not done enough. And neither have our representatives who've completely just ignored the fact that people aren't able to use the same transportation, aren't able to go to the same places as everyone else because of disabilities. So, what I want to do, which is a federal change that needs to be made, is expand the Americans with Disabilities Act so that the enforcement of that act is the burden of the federal government rather than if you're someone that has a wheelchair and realizes you can't access a place that everyone else can, that burden is on you to raise that complaint and to reach out to an attorney and show up in court. And how are you supposed to get there if you can't even use the
Right.
same public transit as everyone else? And then
And
that mixed with the fact that, if you're living off of disability payments, you're basically living in abject poverty. And that is completely unacceptable because there are people who cannot work because of their disabilities, and they could have dependents, they could have to pay rent, they could have to pay for food. These are just basic human needs that you're probably struggling to buy if you're living off of disability payments. So, whenever we're removing income caps to contribute to programs like that keep people alive, then we're freeing up the resources that we need in order to make sure that everybody has what they need for their basic needs.
right. So you touched on a lot, and I definitely want to get into some of those stuff, especially the disability rights thing, more in the interview. And you did talk about rent, and we're gonna definitely talk about that also because that's a big issue in New York. I remember when I think Cuomo ran against the African American guy. It was in the primary. Rent's too damn high or something like that. I don't know if you remember that, but that was back
Mm-hmm.
in like 2010 or something like that. And the rent is probably even sky high worse than it is now, was back then rather. But we'll touch on that in a couple of minutes. But let's talk more about this. So you've been running for a little bit now, and I'm sure you've gotten those phone calls, done those door to doors, talked to the volunteers. So what are you hearing for the issues that the people care about most in District 12? Any kind of issues? Is there a lot of progressive stuff? I know you talked about most of the people are around 35 years old as far as the median age in the district.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the issues that they're talking about in the district?
People are very concerned about the environment and even having a planet. And we surround, so it's basically a circle around the East River, is what the
Mhm.
district is. So
Right.
we surround water and are surrounded by water because the district is on islands.
Right.
And we would be first affected by a rise in sea levels. And we are very, very affected by pollution in our water and in our air.
Right.
And the planet, Green New Deal, and us having a future at all are huge concerns. So I am a very strong supporter of the Green New Deal and think that we can even go further to immediately end, for example, subsidies to factory farms. We need to make all public transit free nationally because we want people to be able to use
Right.
public transit to get wherever they need to go instead of driving in a car all by themselves. And part of the Green New Deal could also be legalizing cannabis, which,
Mhm.
if you're a farm that's struggling to be sustainable and struggling to make a profit and are requiring subsidies from the government in order to survive, then it's possible that you can replace what's on your farm, for example, dairy or meat, with cannabis plants, which
Right, yeah.
are also green.
Why
So
not?
it
Yeah.
could, yeah.
And
So
it's a
it
medical benefit too to for a lot of different illnesses. I was actually just talking to when I was just down in Boca Raton in South Florida. I was talking to another progressive guy, and he was telling me that he was using for the skin cancer. He was dabbling uh, cannabis, but it was like some sort of tar substance almost,
hmm,
but it was made of cannabis, and it would kill the cancer cells for the skin cancer. And he and a bunch of
wow.
other seniors were swearing by this and saying that it worked. So, I mean, these are things that I know the dermatologists aren't too happy about that kind of discovery, but I mean, we need to, as you said, care about other people, do these things so people can survive and thrive in life. But
Yeah.
that's sorry to interrupt you, but that was just something
No,
that
not
you
at all.
mentioned that I think is huge.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. And you raised the fact that maybe some doctors would be unhappy about there being a more natural solution to things.
Right.
And um, that's unfortunate because somehow along the way, our healthcare system has become a for-profit
Right.
system. And it is my firm belief that healthcare is a human right and that you should absolutely not be in a lifetime of debt because you wanted to go to the emergency room so you don't die, or that you require insulin and that should not cost you $1,000 per every time that you need to refill your prescription.
Right.
Um, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's just these healthcare companies are more worried, as you said, about profit than people's health. And the doctors, to finish off on them, most people should be go into medicine to care about and help other people and cure diseases and make sure people live better and safe lives, not to make profit, which is sad. Just a quick question. What is the demographics of the district? I know we talked about the average medium age is 35 years old. But as far as like race and gender, what are the demographics of the district?
I just did want to say I have met some
Sure.
amazing doctors that are fully on board with single payer Medicare for all.
Right.
There definitely are some doctors that probably shouldn't be doctors, but I think if you are making your patients and their well-being the priority, then you're totally on board with single payer. And I know, like for example, my grandma's doctor helped save up sample medications, which is really sad. It's actually
Yeah.
it everything about this just enrages me. But my grandma's doctor saves up samples of medication and gives her like a handful of samples instead of
Wow.
having her fill a prescription because the cost is too high. So there are good and bad doctors, same with
Right.
any
With
other
everything.
profession.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But definitely we want to partner with the doctors that are on that
Right.
right side and make sure that we're prioritizing patient needs and health. Um, I totally forget
The
your next question.
demographics of the district. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, okay. So yes, you're so right that the average age is around 35 years old. And every time that there is a census, the age gets younger, it gets more diverse, it gets more working class. And so if you look at demographics, there is a large Asian population. The most common foreign language spoken in the district is Chinese,
Okay.
which is really, it's great. And we're so happy to have partners that help us translate our materials so that we can reach everybody in the district,
That's great.
and followed closely by Spanish.
Yeah.
So we are really excited to get out there and make sure that we are meeting with not just, who we think our base would be or whatever. We are literally going to be knocking on every single door
Right.
of every potential voter and making sure that we're prioritizing people who've gone ignored by representation so far. And that group has been for the large majority of the first few months of our campaign and canvassing. We've been going on listening tours within NYCHA, which is the housing authority here in New York City, communities that live in public housing in our district. And the stories that we have learned, the experiences, the issues that people in these communities are facing are horrendous.
Yeah.
And we are going to be raising a lot of awareness and advocating for people living in NYCHA because nobody's been doing enough of that. I know,
Right.
for example, people open up their homes and have us in and invite us in. I was having a severe allergic reaction because I'm really allergic to mold. And there was
Oh, okay.
someone who was like, oh, yeah, and we have really extreme mold in our bedroom. And I was like, I
Oh.
could have told you that because I'm like having trouble breathing.
Right.
Yeah, but the fact
Sad. Yeah.
that families live like this and you
Not
can't
right.
do anything and you don't have the means to move out
Yeah.
is awful. So we're prioritizing people who've gone ignored. And don't worry, if you're not in a NYCHA community, we will be making it to your door as well.
All right, that's great. So I have to ask you this question because we do have some middle of the road and some conservatives that I know that do watch these videos. What does a democratic socialist mean to you?
Yeah, so I would love to help dispel any kind of negative connotation around this word. I am a democratic socialist, and to me that means that I couldn't care less about whether some CEO is getting a $12 million bonus next year. What I care about is that everyone has health care and that they won't go into a lifetime of debt because they go to the emergency room or need to get their insulin prescription filled. So, to me, being a democratic socialist means that people and their well being are my priority. And unfortunately, being just a Democrat or being a progressive Democrat, which that word's been co opted and doesn't mean as much as I used to think it did. But that does not necessarily mean that you're going to reject corporate PAC money, for example. And these corporate PACs, these political action committees, throw so much money at politicians. And of course, they want a return on their investment, which is profit. So if you are accepting corporate PAC money, that is a pledge to corporations that you are on their side and not the people's. And the person that I am primarying is one of the people that does accept a lot of this money.
Right. What did you see? What industry she takes most from? Do you know offhand or no?
Yeah, so financial services
No, not
and
surprised. Yeah.
yeah, and big real estate. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's exactly, I'm very passionate because of my work experience in the financial services industry. And whenever we look at, uh, I, I think that the entire industry needs a lot more socialism,
Right.
for example. And there's such a divide between the senior executives and the CEOs of a company and people like IT people, project managers like me,
Yeah.
and people that uh, are the average workers of a company that employs hundreds of thousands of people. And the financial services industry is one of the largest industries that employs people in my district and allows them to pay rent. So it is not my intention to destroy the
Right.
industry, but what we can do is make it accountable to the people, which hasn't been done yet. And some ways to do that is to enact some more regulations so that the burden of decisions made by the senior executives at the top are not the burden of people like me and you.
Right.
And that we aren't the ones bailing the entire industry out if they screw up again. And
Right.
you know what? While we're at it, I would like to reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act in a modernized way and make sure that banks are broken up and that our funds as consumers are protected and won't be gambled away.
So since you brought that up about being a crop project manager, rather, let's talk about that. So you said that you monitor bank regulations for a bank. Is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Right.
for now.
Right. For now, correct. Yes. And you kind of touched on this a little bit. We talked about the 2008 crisis happening. What are your ideas? I know you just brought up Glass-Steagall. I know Bernie's brought up breaking up the big banks. Are those your two big issues of what we should do? Or how do we look, being in the industry, what other issues do you think would help to make sure that this is real, this is regulated, and we make sure that, these guys are not gambling with the money? Because we see a crisis right now with student debt. That's supposed to be
Yeah.
the next big bubble crisis going on right now in our country is student debt.
Oh my gosh, this is such a loaded question. So my
Sorry.
dream, I would love to take the experience I have of working in the private sector and financial sector in New York and sit on the financial services committee and just look all of these executives in the eye and regulate the industry and yes, break up the banks. And it's not it's not going to kill average people's jobs because that's already happening. If we're
Yeah.
looking at the fact that there were these Trump tax cuts to all these huge corporations, that money stayed at the top and ended up being huge bonuses and pay raises for the top 1% of these companies. And the layoffs did not slow down throughout the entire industry. The hiring did not go up and people's average pay did not go up. So trickle down economics is bullshit.
Right.
So
Agreed.
I want to take all of that knowledge that I have from my daily life and experience and just being an average person in the district, and I want to regulate the industry so that 2008 doesn't happen every couple of
Yeah.
decades. So we're looking at another economic downturn according to a lot of
Right.
economists, and it's scary. We haven't learned the lessons of 2008. We put Dodd-Frank in place after 2008 and then rolled it back in
Yep.
2018 because a lot of our representatives are buddies with the CEOs of these companies. So,
Even the
yes,
Democrats in the Senate voted for that bill, and some of those people were up for re-election, and they still voted for that. The Democrats, and you know this as being a person that's a progressive, need to wake up and see that the people want more progressives like you, like Bernie, in power, AOC too, not these guys that say, oh, well, I'm from Montana. I need to vote halfway Republican this day, and then we'll
yeah,
vote with the Democrats this day. And you understand that. And that's the problem in society right now. I mean, you see that in New York. You see that where I'm from in Rhode Island. We have Democrats in the House, the Senate, and the governor in Rhode Island. And you guys do. And two, I believe also. But you guys have, and this is a little bit off topic, but you guys have these Democrats that vote with the Republicans in New York State. I
yeah.
don't even understand that.
We just I think you're talking about the IDC.
Yes.
Luckily we got rid of them
Oh, they did. Okay.
in 2018. Yeah,
Right.
down with IDC.
Okay.
But we still have people uh throughout all levels of government that, like you mentioned, um vote the way that they think their donors would like. And the
Right.
thing is, with us grassroots candidates, like we are cultivating donors and support in an organic grassroots way from having our beliefs exactly as they are and getting out there, knocking on doors, talking with as many people as possible.
Right.
And we're not following the money. This is totally grassroots and
Right.
people who believe in us getting into DC and fighting, and our only commitment is to the people. Then those people donate, and that's what keeps us going.
Right. So let's move on to the issue more so, and then I want to get into your comedy routine afterwards. But a couple questions on the issues. So I know what got you into disabilities rights. We just kind of went through that earlier on in the interview. You talked about the ADA, about making it stronger. What other policies besides the ADA and making it stronger do you think you would try to put into legislation as fair explode whatever the word is, regardless. I have a sister that has autism, and we talked about that before me and
Hmm.
you off here. And she does have a service dog that's a golden retriever lab mix. The dog, has gone to Disney, has gone to other restaurants and stuff like that. And these other people bring in fake service dogs, and they try to attack my sister. They try to attack the dog. So that's a big problem for people with disabilities. We see service dogs for people that, whether it's autism, veterans, etc. What other policies would you see, like something like that, a legislation for more disclosure on people with service dogs to make sure that we've seen people on planes get bitten in the face by dogs that are fake service dogs, and it's just not right for the people, as we talked about, the real people with disabilities that need these dogs to help them get around, whether in a wheelchair or not, be successful in life. And then we have these other people that are just ignorant and disrespectful to the rest of society that are using these dogs because they don't want to pay to put it under the plane. They don't want to keep it at home. So first, what is your take on the service dog thing that I just said with the fake
Hmm.
vests, etc.? And what would you do besides the ADA to make people with stronger legislation for people with disabilities?
Yeah. So with the service dogs, we just have, first of all, anyone who's judging your sister and
Mm.
for having a dog, that's, I don't even have words for that. That's disgusting
Right.
because some, some disabilities are not visible
Seeing you.
to, yeah, exactly. So there's no reason at all to look at somebody and to say, why do you have a service dog?
Yeah.
You have no idea what somebody is experiencing. So first of all, it's terrible that your sister gets that kind of treatment and judgment.
Right.
And it is important that we maintain the sanctity of the fact that there are service dogs for people who really need them.
Yeah.
So definitely, people who are fraudulently
Right.
using service dogs or like putting fake vests on
Right.
dogs, I mean that should definitely result in some sort of a fine. Um, I actually didn't know that people put fake vests on dogs, which
Yeah,
is
sorry to interrupt, but they do. If you go online, you can go on Amazon or eBay, and they just sell these vests, and they're
wow.
outright. You can buy them for 10, $15. And the way, we see these is because service dogs aren't supposed to bark unless you tell them to. You go in Disney or any one of these places, even restaurants, and we had an incident where it was not a golden retriever, a German Shepherd that was lunging actually at our dog, where our dog was just kind of standing there, not doing anything. So there's like an issue when one dog's lunging, the other dog's just behaving. But the reason I brought that up is because that's a big issue that they're trying to bring up in Congress, and they're petitioning a lot of people that are in Congress to sign legislation to say there should be like some sort of federal ID that you get through the
Hmm.
government that's free of charge through the organization that you get the dog from, or through you send your paperwork through the government and they approve it.
Hmm.
So that's what I was kind of asking. Would you be in favor of some sort of legislation with an ID that's like a governmental ID, such as your license, that says that somebody that's working can say, "Hey, is this dog legit?" So we'd be happy to do that because it's for the safety not only for the dog, for my sister, but also for you and me and everybody else that's regularly trying to enjoy whatever establishment is. So that was what I
Yeah.
was kind of getting to.
Yeah, I mean, I would support that legislation
Right.
Just and then you know that if you see someone with a dog that is the service dog, then
Right.
leave them alone,
Right.
please.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I am in favor of making sure that there is sort of that protection in place,
Right.
and that would also help protect those people that do have service dogs as well.
Right. And secondly, about the ADA, do you have any other proposals to kind of? I know you talked about building on the ADA, but any other separate proposals as far as kind
Yeah.
of disability rights?
Yeah, so disability, if you receive disability income, that
Right.
needs to be livable.
Right.
So
Agreed.
yeah, I've been reached out to by so many people that are struggling to,
Yep.
for example, get lights for their electric wheelchair.
Right.
And that is considered extra,
Yeah.
and they're already living off of such a small amount of money and
Right.
don't have that money. So they resort to, for example, GoFundMe if they
Yeah. It's
don't
sad.
have. Yeah, it's ridiculous. If you're surviving on disability, you are living in poverty. And so that absolutely needs to be a livable wage where you can pay for all of your needs, and you don't have to go fund me to buy a wheelchair part so that you
Right.
can travel down the street safely.
Right. We see Donald Trump just cut food stamps, so
Yes.
just more cuts for the working people and no cuts. 83% of the tax scam that he passed went to the top 1%, and as you said, it's just trickled down crumbs. And we've seen that in the Bush years, in the Reagan years, and now in the Trump years. None of that stuff works.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fluff and no stuff. But we'll move on to the last few questions. You talked about affordable housing and rent control, fair housing in New York City. I've heard through friends that live in New York City. They got to live with 8 people to afford
Yeah,
the rent in some parts of the city, which is kind of disgusting. I mean, you might want to live with 2 people, but 8 or 7 or 6, that's insanity. Um,
for sure.
what are your ideas in Congress to kind of, pass something for fair rent all across the country, not just in New York? Because you look at Orlando, where I am, you look at Los Angeles, New York, all the big cities, Chicago. I mean, you can't, a regular working person, making 10, $12 an hour, can't afford to live in these cities and stuff. They can't afford all these stuff, as you said. There's car insurance, electricity, water, rent, and the list goes on, and you can't afford it. So, what policies would you put in place for affordable housing?
Yeah, so this has to be done in a comprehensive way. So
Right,
the fact that people can't afford housing also is tied to the fact that wages are not livable.
right,
So whenever I'm looking at minimum wage, federal minimum wage, I think it's completely wrong that we address it as a one size fits all.
right,
Whenever we're looking at, for example, um, Fairmont, West Virginia, and District 12 in New York City. We're looking at two completely
yeah,
different livable wages. So I think that right now in 2019, the absolute floor that federal minimum wage should be is $15 right
right,
now, as
right,
of 5:46 p.m. on October 14th.
right,
So, but it shouldn't be one size fits all, and it should be based on what's actually livable in each locality, which in New York
right.
City is probably
It's not.
upwards of $30 an hour.
Yeah,
So that's number one. Federal jobs guarantee is number two,
mhm,
because there are people that have to take off of work, for example, and care for their parents who are sick. Just
right,
as an example, one of many examples, we want people to care for others and to contribute to society in positive ways.
right,
And that's exactly what the federal jobs guarantee by Bernie Sanders is meant to do.
right,
And so I support that. And that is also tied to being paid a livable wage to do this. And then in terms of housing affordability and fair housing, People's Action actually just released a national homes guarantee, which I fully, wholeheartedly endorse and support. That, for example, would build 12 million new social houses over the next social housing units over the next 10 years. And $150 billion would be invested in existing public housing over the next 5 years. And for example, uh, we absolutely need to incorporate the Green New Deal into all of the aspects of our policy. And the Green New Deal would be at the center of this plan whenever we're renovating and building new units. Absolutely need to be renovated in a way that makes these housing units more sustainable, more environmentally friendly. And also, the Green New Deal is tied to people having jobs as well.
Right.
That,
Agreed.
yeah, so all of these things together comprehensively help to address the lack of affordability, the lack of enough housing, abolishing homelessness, which is totally doable. And I am getting really involved and speaking with economists that are teaching me about modern monetary theory.
Yes.
And I am not an expert in this topic yet. I would love to be eventually, but
Right.
the idea of us not having enough money
Right.
is a lie.
It's fake. Yeah.
And yeah, it's fake. And the fact that we absolutely and urgently need to spend more money on, you know, building these social housing units and renovating public housing. Um, Absolutely, it's not a problem. It's just it hasn't been done because it hasn't been the priority of people in power.
Lauren, there's always
And
enough money for the military industrial
yes,
complex to get bump it up to $745 billion and climbing. So when they spew that lie, it is BS, as you
yes,
said.
total BS. The federal government can create more money
Print,
at
yep.
any time. And if we wanted to renovate all of the public housing across the United States, we could do that. No problem. And it wouldn't cause inflation if it's done in the right way. And we could have a federal jobs guarantee. And we could enact the Green New Deal. This is not a question of whether there's enough money because there is. It's
Yeah,
a question of people who are in power don't want to piss off their donors, who are the fossil fuel industry,
yeah,
who are the private health insurance industry, who are big real estate developers, and they want to keep their big donors. So let us get these people out of power and get people in office that are willing to prioritize and put their neck out there and make these things happen.
I have to ask you this, unfortunately. What is your what is your take on impeachment?
Oh, yeah. This is not in, yeah. So I was the first person in District 12, including the incumbent, who called for the impeachment of our president.
Right,
And yeah, I think it is the duty of people in Congress to protect the Constitution and their constituents against enemies, foreign and domestic. And that is exactly, this is a growing list of concerns that this person in office is absolutely just bastardizing the
right.
presidency and the White House. So
I do want to
yeah.
I do want to push back a little bit on impeachment, though. I do feel that I agree with impeachment. I think that this guy is a con artist. He's a used car salesman. He's a joke. But I do worry that the Democrats, especially in Congress, we went from Russiagate to Ukraine Gate, and I'm worried that with pushing now Ukraine Gate, that makes Trump's base stronger. If the Democrats push for impeachment, we know it's not going to go through the Senate. Do you worry that with it not going through the Senate, that Trump gets stronger and this could help his reelection? And then you look at if, God forbid, Joe Biden wins the Democratic nomination. We hope that that's not the case. But if Joe Biden wins the nomination, we got Hillary Clinton with a you know what. running against Donald Trump again. We got NAFTA for Biden. We got the TPP. You got also Biden supporting the crime bill, whereas
Hmm.
other candidates such as Bernie was not for all that stuff. And then you got Biden now with Ukraine gate because his son was Trump is way more corrupt than Biden, but it's just like Hillary. Well, Hillary was corrupt. Trump was corrupt, but Trump is a media genius. He knows how to manipulate the media, whereas Hillary doesn't, and Biden for sure doesn't. So I just worry that, like I said, to push back about impeachment, that we go through with this, it doesn't go through the Senate, and then Biden for some reason wins the nomination, and Trump gets another 4 years. What is your take on that?
It definitely is a concern, but I don't think that we should let it keep us from doing what's right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, in my mind, I'm kind of equating it to like if you work in a company and know that someone is committing fraud or embezzling money, and you
Right.
don't say anything because you know that there's going to be some sort of repercussion. It's To
Right.
me, it's the same. Like, we know that there's this growing list of things that Donald Trump is doing that is
Right. Of
completely
course.
impeachable.
Yes.
And it's the right thing to do to proceed with these hearings. And the Senate, there's a lot of people that for some reason don't seem to have the right morals in place.
Right.
And that is a problem, it's a concern. But on the other side, it's our job to unite as much as we can behind a candidate that's going to push for the right things.
Right.
And I am 100% all cards in behind Bernie Sanders right now.
Right.
And that's that's who I think has the platform that we absolutely need going
Right.
forward. And I hope that we can unite around his platform, and also point out the fact that Joe Biden is proposing incremental steps at best
Yes.
to address completely urgent problems that are life and death situations for a lot of people. So, I am concerned about Donald Trump's base being strengthened. I'm concerned about Biden in general
Right.
right now, but putting a lot of my energy behind doing what's right
Right.
and hoping to spread the message around how important it is that we unite behind a truly progressive
Right.
candidate. Even though I did say that that word has no meaning,
Right.
um, if it ever did, then Bernie
Yeah.
Sanders is the guy.
Well,
So
CNN, I know CNN and MSNBC disagree with Bernie Sanders as the right guy. So, unfortunately,
yeah,
that's the way the mainstream media is right now. And that's why Trump gets away with calling fake news because CNN and MSNBC put all this fake propaganda. They had all this Russiagate stuff against Trump, and then half of it didn't turn out to be true. And then Trump can come out and say it's fake news, and who can disagree when they were wrong. So it's really
yeah.
sad that that's the way the media is now. But last two questions for you. As far as you were endorsed by brand new Congress, I know AOC is not too far away from your district. Have you talked to Our Revolution, Bernie's campaign, or AOC about maybe campaigning in your district for you, or an endorsement or anything like that?
So my team is definitely reaching out to all like-minded people and
Right.
leaders and hoping to get as much support as possible. So yes,
Right.
yeah, we're doing all we can, and definitely endorsements and partnerships with like-minded people would go a long way, especially for our
Agree.
grassroots campaign.
Agree. And let's talk about lastly about the stand-up comedy stuff. So first of all, what got you into stand-up comedy?
So I am a horrible actor. I took a series of acting
Oh,
classes, and you might have noticed from my interview that I suffer from something. I like to raise awareness around the fact that I suffer from resting pleasant face. So
Okay.
I can be as angry, like I am running for office because I'm angry about stuff I'm being completely ignored and how broken and corrupt our system is.
Right.
And I can't, my face is broken. And I realized that in my acting classes when, for example, I was acting out like a breakup scene and my teacher, who's awesome, was like,
Yeah.
Lauren, why do you look happy? So very kindly, I had it suggested to me from a fellow actor that I might want to consider trying out stand-up comedy. And I
Right.
tried the acting class to begin with to meet people in the city. I did it off of a Groupon
Oh, wow. Okay.
and uh, just to meet more people. And
Yeah.
I really love being part of the creative world in New York City.
Right.
And I like to tell stories and tell jokes and put my thoughts into sequences that entertain people. So stand-up comedy really called to me and it made sense. And I also suffer from, suffer is a strong word. I have anxiety.
Okay.
So I have social anxiety too.
Oh,
And
wow.
uh, the first class of stand-up comedy, all we had to do was go up on stage and say our name. And
Right.
I was shaking so much and sweating profusely. And the fact that the class has helped me so much, and I
Awesome.
can
Yeah.
go into random basements and tell jokes,
Wow.
and I'm running for Congress.
Right.
It's crazy. And I would love anybody who's watching who has anxiety or something that they're afraid is holding them back.
Yeah.
It's totally possible to do whatever you are dreaming about. So
Right. So, last question. Can you lay any jokes on us quickly? Put you on the
yeah.
spot, but sorry about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the jokes that I tell is
Okay.
this, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, yeah, you're
Is it
fine.
is it
It's not
clean
that.
show?
No, it's fine. You can
So
swear. Yeah.
So, so I am a New Yorker and a
Yeah.
millennial, so my language isn't always the best. But
It's fine.
like I mentioned, I do suffer from resting pleasant face, and a lot of people, just because of that, are like, Lauren, you're too nice to run for office. Why are you running for office? And my response is, go fuck yourself.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah. So there you go. But also,
Okay.
isn't that the point that nice people aren't representing us
Right.
and that we're so used to thinking, oh, that person's too nice to be in Congress. They care too much about people, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous. So I
Well,
like, yeah.
that's what they do to Bernie. They say that nothing's gonna, none of his policies are gonna change and stuff. I mean, happen rather. It's too wishful thinking. So I do agree with you, but it really is sad that we don't have any nice people that will represent us. But how can people help you? If you have a store where like people can buy your merchandise, donate, make phone calls, text. What do you got?
Yes, all of that. If you go to
Okay,
laurenashcraft.com,
sure.
so LaurenAshcraft.com, all my stories there and my stances. There's a way to contact me and ask questions. And
Okay,
also, there is a big orange donate button.
right.
And totally appreciate everyone who contributes in any way that they can because we
Right.
are going up against somebody who gladly accepts corporate PAC money, and we're doing this all in a very grassroots, people powered way. So every donation goes a long way, and thank you. And you can
Right.
also follow me on social media at Vote Ashcraft, Twitter, Instagram, and also Facebook.com/Vote Ashcraft.
Right, awesome. And thank you for your time, Lauren. And for everybody, definitely, if you can throw a couple of bucks for Lauren, that'd be great. You've heard her through for, I don't know, maybe 50 minutes now, and she's the real deal. She's not a BS, not a bullshitter. She tells it like it is. We need more young people in Congress. We have these people I'm not trying to be ageist because I love Bernie. So I don't care how old somebody is. They could be 120. If they represent my values and are trying to help people, then we should keep them in. But we have these people that just hang around. There's no term limits in Congress. They just sit, they take the money, they make a couple of visits to their district, do a couple of town halls, and we'll say, see you next year. We don't need those people anymore. We need fresh faces, people that are middle class, people that know what it is to work at Starbucks, what it is to work at McDonald's, people that have been in your shoes. So these are the people like Lauren that we need to bring into Congress, and we need to shape this place up and shake it up and put these new people in. So Lauren, thanks again. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having